Your Honor, I have created this video to prove my innocence. Based on the evidence at the scene, the crime I am accused of could not have happened. As it was reported, I was driving on 501 and all of a sudden, a boy rode out in front of me on his bicycle. I stopped as soon as I saw him and left a 20-meter streak on the road. The officer accused me of speeding over 45 miles per hour, but I was only going 37. I am able to prove this through physics and the work-energy theorem. So, in order to explain my case, I must first define some fundamental concepts of physics. Firstly, according to Encyclopedia Britannica, friction is the force that resists the sliding or rolling of one solid object over another. So, when driving, having a high friction makes it easier to stop or slow down due to a higher traction between the car tires and the road. Coefficient of friction is a measure of how much friction is present and can be calculated by dividing friction force by normal force. In the work-energy theorem, the two big variables are kinetic energy and work. Kinetic energy is the energy an object has when it's moving and is defined as 1/2 times mass times velocity squared. Work is the transfer of energy and can be defined as force times displacement times cosine of theta. A car traveling down the road has kinetic energy in one direction. So, to stop the car, the kinetic energy must become zero. In order to make the kinetic energy zero, the work must be equal and opposite to the initial kinetic energy. This leads to the use of the equation kinetic energy equals negative work. When substituting the variables, the equation can then be rewritten as 1/2 times mass times velocity squared equals negative force times displacement times cosine of theta. The coefficient of friction comes into this equation when dealing with force. Friction force is the force needed in the equation because it's the force slowing down the car. To find this, the equation for coefficient of friction must be manipulated by solving for friction force. So, friction force equals normal force times coefficient of friction. To find normal force, Newton's second law must be applied. This law states that the sum of all forces is equal to mass times acceleration. For normal force, the acceleration is the acceleration due to gravity, which is 9.8 meters per second squared. So, normal force is equal to mass times gravity. Overall, the force component in the equation is equal to, and can be substituted for, mass times gravity times the coefficient of friction. The final equation is negative acceleration due to gravity times coefficient of friction times displacement times cosine of theta is equal to 1/2 times velocity squared. Since mass was on both sides of the equation, it was cancelled out. After researching coefficients of friction, the typical coefficient of friction of a dry road was found to be 0.7. This was found on hyperphysics.edu. Now that most of the variables are known, we can solve for velocity. Plugging in the data, we have negative 9.8 meters per second squared times 0.7 times 20 meters times cosine of 180 equals 1/2 times velocity squared. Using algebra to solve for velocity, we get 16.57 meters per second. To more easily compare this to the speed limit on 501, we will convert it to miles per hour. To do this, we take 16.57 meters per second and multiply it by 3,600 seconds over 1,609.34 meters to get 37.06 miles per hour. Now you know, Your Honor, that through physics, the truth can be revealed. I was only going 37 miles per hour when I put on my brakes to stop for the boy on the bike. I was, in fact, not speeding. So, I have proven myself innocent.